Hiya, welcome to Hinny High. Today's video is a request from my friend Leah on planets in the 11th house. Thank you as always for your requests. If anyone else would like to see us do a particular video, please just ask in the comments or email at queerhinny@gmail.com. So some disclaimers. This video focuses solely on having a planet or planets in the 11th house of the birth chart. If applying this to your or someone else's chart, check the sign or signs. I use the Placidus system, by the way, in that house, as well as any other significant astro bodies and any aspects being made to this planet or planets from other planets in other houses. I'm gonna go kind of one by one through the planets, and I'm treating each one in isolation. So if you have more than one in the 11th house, combine the explanations that I give to get the overall planetary chemistry of your 11th house. Alrighty, so what the frig is the 11th house? This basically is the penultimate house of your chart. A house denotes a set of themes crafted by the 11th landlord of the skies, the 11th landlord being Aquarius. The 11th house is one of the upper echelon houses, houses which contain themes akin to us, or we, as opposed to me, myself, and I. It comes after the 10th house, and the 10th house contains themes pertaining to your calling in this world, your reputation, and what I like to call your castle, as built and proven with the efforts that you are known to have put in thus far. The 11th house comes before the 12th house, the 12th house containing themes pertaining to your very spirit, your hidden enemies, your life lessons, and all that jazz. For the 11th house, we can imagine that Aquarius has set this bunch of rules and regulations that are to be the themes your planet or planets in the 11th house are closely connected to. The Aquarian 11th house themes pertain to collectivities, networks, causes, the mass dissemination of messages, teams, societies and clubs, friendship circles, groups, activisms, collective wishes, your wishes, alliances, collaborations, and more. So let's move on to the planets then, and we can imagine the planets as the tenants of the 11th house. For the good, bad, or the ugly, they are the ones who've ended up on your day and time of birth to be the living tenants of your 11th house, abiding by then the 11th house rules. But as discussed actually in my recent Jupiter in the 4th house video, just because a landlord, in this case Aquarius, set the themes of the house does not mean that the tenant will be on their best behavior. Planets you have in the 11th house are directing most, if not all, of their power to 11th house themes. So it's up to the individual to assess what damage, if any, is being done to the house. The natal chart houses with planets in them show us which themes are most prominent in your lifetime and which houses you are already, as an individual, inherently channeling a lot of your energies into. So let's start with having Mars in the 11th house, because that's actually my own 11th house planetary placement, so why not start there? Mars could kind of love being in the 11th house if and when Mars takes on positions of leadership, positions of demonstrating power, allowing the individual to literally lead initiatives, or at least whose passion and drive is going to be respected in the group. However, Mars could cause the individual to be selfish in the group or with 11th house issues, painting the person more as the ruthless one of the group or the tantrum thrower. Briefly, Mars is associated with archetypes of power, drive, determination, passion, anger, aggression, taking, conquering, and basically where you spiritually throw your D around, because Mars is also all that is phallic. And Mars also represents how we're turned on and what gets your engines flaring, what gets you up in the morning, how you're going to argue, how you wage war. And it represents most basically action, taking action, and the strategies you take to get what you want. If the sun represents what you want, Mars is often considered to be how you go about getting what you want, fulfilling those wants. Mars's power within us can be impulsive, unapologetic, and perhaps most effective when you have a challenge that you want to take on. With this placement, while you're keen to be part of circles of common interest, you don't actually care that much about being liked or disliked. You can quickly get bored at parties, events, and meetings. And if you're genuinely interested in a group effort, you are likely one of the most exerting and direct contributors to that group effort. Not being listened to by the group can really freak you off, and the sign that Mars is in should give an indicator as to how you're gonna get that anger out. You absolutely love starting new groups, probably, or collaborative projects, though you tend to be more the person doing the kicking off, and you're a bit less into the long haul. These groups could range from big things like activist causes and funding campaigns to smaller things like being the one to set up a WhatsApp group. You're not so afraid also to act on your impulses within a group setting, even if reacting to somebody higher or stronger in that group. You might talk over others to be in talk about others or be in some other way domineering, basically, in a group setting. Alrighty, so how about Jupiter in the 11th? I think Jupiter could be super suited to this house, so long as the individual remembers to check in now and then on the seriousness of being part of a group or collective cause, and that they don't have their head in the clouds while getting nothing progressive done. Jupiter is associated with archetypes of generosity, belief, faith, optimism, wisdom, big learning, expansion, blessings, and luck. Jupiter also represents how we philosophize, where we might push our luck, and where we might get preachy, how we might show off, and where things are easy for us. It represents truth-telling, conviction, but at the same time keeping things light. If the sun represents what you want, Jupiter could be considered how you come to realize and reflect on what you want. Is it about what you want, or is it about learning something after getting what you want, or what you wanted? Jupiter's power within us then can be exaggerated, it can be divine, and perhaps most effective when you need to trust in the journey, even though a destination might not be in sight. So you likely, if you have this placement, can't even count the number of different groups that you're a member of, or the amount of causes that you're behind, most likely being a favored and jolly member of the group. Definitely overdo it at parties, events, and meetings. Even if you're not so interested in a group effort, you are likely to still have something positive or philosophical to say, or to see the silver linings. Not being listened to by the group can really freak you off as well, similar to having Mars here, although your reactions are best described as passionate, questioning, even inspirational. You absolutely love spurring on the group, teaching and learning through collaborative projects, though you might easily skirt over small details and even be a bit too casual about the severity of some group concern or situation. You have big luck when it comes to attracting large audiences, so it could be easier than you think to get into things like broadcasting, debating, and public speaking. You're likely to be the super confident one of the group, perhaps at times coming off as arrogant or just foolish. You might also overstep other people's boundaries and offend others, though you're probably still going to come out just fine because you're usually keen on keeping friends, on being friends, and not so keen on keeping enemies. If you have Saturn in the 11th house, this might be a very good thing. Saturn is the ruler of Aquarius, which was the landlord of this house. So as long as the individual sees the point of being part of a group or a cause, they're going to be serious, real, reliable. Saturn is associated with archetypes of severity, structure, foundations, the concrete, harsh lessons, caution, discipline, responsibility, and status. Saturn also represents how we plan, where we might be a bit strict, and where we might spend lots of time and effort, and how we handle also our reputation, and also where things are difficult for us. It represents coldness, efficiency, and keeping things within the limits. If the sun represents what you want, Saturn could represent how and where you work hard and honestly, if you really do want that thing. Saturn's power within us can be slow, accurate and perhaps most effective when attention has been properly paid to your karma, time, and resources. Perhaps you don't have that many circles or are involved in that many collective projects, but those that you are associated with are taken seriously. You can be dry and conservative at parties, events, and meetings. Even if you're not so interested in a group effort, what might be more important for you is the status, the title, or credit that might be gained from putting in your effort. Not being listened to by the group could possibly frig you off, but most likely you won't get emotional about it. You could be very into controlling the group, being a manager, though you might need to be careful that your attention to the rules doesn't inhibit collective progress. If you're sincerely into the group or collective cause, then you have great potential to become an authority within that. But it's going to take a long time and a lot of grinding. You're likely to be the super concerned one of the group, and sometimes you're ignored for this. Though quite often your reservations are correct. You might be a really responsible and down-to-earth friend, but there could be this tendency for you to frown upon or be skeptical of your friends. So let's scoot on over to Uranus in the 11th house. Uranus is a secondary ruler of Aquarius, the landlord of this house. So you might hear this placement being described as being at home. Uranus loves being here because you're just going to have all these natural powers geared towards masterminding group projects, having a zillion networks, fighting for the most cutting edge, forward-thinking causes. Uranus is associated with archetypes of chaos, unpredictability, freak events, the runaway, shocks, freedom, the bizarre, the alien, and progress. Uranus also represents how we do things out of the box, where we might be contradictory, where we might be unique and original, how we throw out the old, and where our genius and innovation shines through. It represents lightning, anarchy, and avoiding, like the plague, anything deemed routine or regulated. If the sun represents what you want, Uranus could represent getting what you want through finding the freedom for your self-expression and unapologetically being your unique self. Uranus's power within us can be slow and dormant, just like Saturn, and it can be sudden. And perhaps this power is most effective when we've got to sort of get ourselves out of ruts, when we must challenge the status quo, when we must fight for freedom. You likely are part of lots of circles and projects, yet at the same time they could be the circles and projects that are like weirdly different from one another. You can be the wacky, weird one at parties, events, and meetings. If you're not interested in what the group is doing, you're likely gonna make it known, and you may well rebel or shock by suddenly leaving the group or causing some chaos. Not being listened to by the group severely freaks you off, and you most likely want to hammer your point home or even waste time trying to prove something because you just can't stop yourself. You could be an excellent convener, a brilliant host, though this placement can easily make you obsessed or get you involved in something cultish or a bit too far off the page. When your uniqueness is found in the group, there is nothing stopping your hyperactive powers that are more often used to help out the weak, the stuck, and the oppressed. You're likely to be the maverick and the cool one of the group. You can often find that your wishes are granted to you in the most random ways, but beware of plunging yourself and others into irreversible situations. Alrighty, so now we move on to having the mystical Neptune in the 11th house. I feel like Neptune here could be brilliant for the individual. It could be unbelievably deadly as well. But whatever the case, Neptune is going to shroud everything in fantasy and illusion, with you quite possibly gaining fame and notoriety in groups and with audiences. Neptune is associated with archetypes of spirit, surrender, magic, escapism, addiction, inspiration, ephemera, imagery, and confusion. Neptune also represents how and where we escape the mundane moment, where we might gain most from simply releasing, where we might be fantastical and delusional, how we also most purely and deeply express our spirit, and where we might become real victims. It represents liquids and mist, dreamscapes, finding things that are in the in-between, where things are not quite what they seem. If the sun represents what you want, Neptune could represent our deep spiritual powers used to get what we want. Powers strangely enacted by letting go of the very thing you want. Neptune's power within us then can be slow and dormant, just like Saturn and Uranus, but it can also be sublime. And perhaps this power is most effective when we simply trust in the wonder and magic of the world to be our ultimate beacon, our ultimate savior. Okay, just let that go by. Perhaps for you with this placement, groups and circles cannot blur into one or seep into each other. Maybe you somehow are very fascinated and fascinating when it comes to your relationships with these groups. You can be the wishy-washy, super sweet one at parties, events, and meetings. You might be unable to see when groups or a group dynamic are not good for you because there's this strong denial, or you view it in a highly rose-tinted glasses, la vie en rose sort of way. If the group isn't listening to you or including you, you might start proclaiming yourself as a victim. You could even be a superstar of some sort who has people transfixed on you and on the issue. You could have a high savior mentality, but your contributions to the group or perception of the group's objective could appear confusing to others as well. You have a strong power to bring peace, love, and simplicity back to the collectivity, thanks to this sort of ability to both empathize with and become all the other members of the group. You could contribute amazingly to collectivities through a masterful use of the arts, in particular through video, film, music, poetry, photography. Your dedication to these collectivities can be spurred on by beautiful images and messages you get from your everyday being and interactions, which quite likely seeps into the sentiments of other people. Next up is Pluto in the 11th house. So having Pluto here is in some ways similar to having Mars here, but Pluto isn't going to be as blatant or impulsive as Mars. Instead, Pluto will be kind of sitting back more and observing the group, scrutinizing the collective cause or whatever other 11th house theme it's engaging with. Pluto is also associated with archetypes of destruction, poison, killing, psyche, dark sides, the outskirts, obsession, manipulation, and cleansing. Pluto also represents how and where we are or aren't in control, insidious transformations, the anti-ego, how we mastermind without even necessarily knowing it, and where we might attract uncomfortable karmic issues that just won't seem to go away. It represents cores as well, such as, the heart of the matter, or nuclear cores even. It represents painful purges and nightmares. If the sun represents what you want, then Pluto is like that therapist that you meet in secret who asks you, why do you want it? What does that say about you? Where does this want come from? Taking you on a kind of trial of the dark recesses so you can be sure it's what you want. Pluto's power within us can be slow and dormant, like Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune, but this one can also be scary. And perhaps this power is most effective when we need a wake-up call about the problematic realities we get involved with, so that we can clean up our act and be in control instead of being controlled. If you have this placement, well, first of all, you just might not be a fan of groups and collective initiatives, because there could be this, for example, a big trust issue, or there could be a lot of cynicism. You might be the incessant, powerful one at parties, events, and meetings. You will probably know exactly when something untoward is going on in a group. You can sniff out when someone is trying to puppeteer everyone else. If the group isn't listening to you, this could seriously affect you and make you a vengeful, plotting kind of person. If you know yourself well, you'll simply be able to quietly leave a group and never see them again. You might be the investigator also of the group. You could be excellent at taking out the selfish elements affecting a collectivity, but you also need to be aware of letting power get the better of you. You want to be ruthless and dead serious for the cause, which obviously might make you an amazing activist and truth teller. If you don't know yourself so well, you could deliberately try to break up the group, immobilize the initiative, and be more into something because it's secret and underground than because you genuinely care about or understand it. When you want certain issues or wishes to come true, it involves a long process of cutting things and people away, and it requires you to be as honest and real as you can. Alrighty, so let's move on to the Sun. Sun in the 11th house suggests someone comfortable with groups, someone very appreciative of their wishes being granted, someone who might also be a good leader or prominent figure in collective efforts. The Sun is associated with archetypes of the father, ego, wants, vitality, rejoice, duties, pride, regality, and energy. The Sun also represents how we're seen in the open and in the public, our sense of self, our personality, and what we gravitate toward. It represents bravery, the light, and everything that we want. The Sun's power within us is essential. It is our brilliance, and perhaps this power is most effective when we forget who we are, when we need to recognize ourselves, and when we struggle with confidence. If you have this placement, you could well be the big beaming one of the group who is content and always on hand to sort of parent other people in the group. You can be very energizing, the very fun one at parties, events, and meetings. You might often come to the defense of the collectivity. Perhaps you are also a great person at shining light on others' qualities, great at being the cheerleader, but also at being the boss. If the group isn't listening to you, this could get you angry and brattish, and quite likely you'll keep on talking anyway, even if people are trying to not pay attention. You could easily be the creative one in the group. Perhaps you're great at highlighting identity issues as well, but sometimes your personality or your personal wants and self-identity may prevent collective progress. When you allow yourself to be attracted to the things you want, they will likely come to you easily, which I think mostly means you should just continue your everyday trajectory, doing what you do best, confident that confident that what is rightfully yours will surely come to you. This placement could, for some people, mean too much authority over a group, or exerting too much energy on these groups, being prouder of being part of the group than actually contributing to the progressions of the group. Now then, having Mercury in the 11th house. So Mercury is pretty pleased here, though perhaps doesn't always know why they are so active in so many groups and initiatives. Perhaps they are more curious than they are committed. Mercury is associated with archetypes of the messenger, language, communication, the trickster, the courier, the merchant, teleporters, mouthpieces, and even things like small buzzing insects. Mercury also represents how we think, or how we're intelligent, what we like to put our hands to, what stimulates our brain, and how we engage with our localities. It represents restlessness and relativity and keeping things interesting. Mercury's power within us is so mundane yet so essential, because it's like our brains telling our bodies to do everything they do. It is how we handle and process and send information. And perhaps this power is most effective when we are searching for answers, or when we are bored and jaded about things, about issues, or when we're trying to figure out the best ways through which we can convey our message. If you have this placement, maybe you're zipping around constantly from group to group, from this society to that club. Your desire to explore common interests with others seemingly endless and exciting. You might have a lot of group chats that you're a part of, or a lot of causes that you fight for, or a lot of circles that you find yourself falling into. You could be the inquisitive, witty one at parties, events, and meetings. You could be considered the juvenile or spirited one of the group. You're able to get on with pretty much anyone, and you also seem to have an answer for everyone. If the group isn't listening to you, this probably makes you think more and kind of get in your head a bit, until you suss out how to get yourself heard. But at the end of the day, you will leave a group just as quickly as you joined the group if you've lost interest. You are the clever one the crafty one, though a certain flakiness that you possess might frequently let the group down. An interest in gossip and the dark side of matters could distract you from the initiative or render your friendship circles a little lacking in substance. A narrowing down of the collectivities you're a part of could greatly improve your effectiveness within these collectivities. But it will also protect your mental health and give you a greater sense of focus and progress. Last but certainly not least is Venus, and having Venus in the 11th house. I hope someone with this placement is not having that many 11th house problems, because I think Venus has the potential to do very well here, almost effortlessly. Venus is associated with archetypes of the diplomat, love, culture, the aesthetic, the judge, the talented, desire, pleasure, and harmony. Venus also represents how we flow or how we relate, where we attract things and people. And it's also where things are kind of mellowed out for us in the birth chart, and how we also push away the ugly. Venus represents passivity, tact, and quality over quantity. Venus's power within us is about divine attraction and manifestation. It is where and how we breathe beauty and class. Perhaps this power is also most effective when there's a lack of value, when things must be balanced out, or when we're in tune with how exactly it is that we love, how to speak our love language. If you have this placement, group activities, collective causes, initiatives involve a lot of socializing. Conversation and interactions are flowing. Things are nice and refined. Even serious causes that you're involved with could have that element of peace, calm. You can be the popular, flattering one at parties, events, and meetings. You will likely be highly accommodating and tolerant even of the most abrasive members of the group. You are excellent at complimenting people and playing up their qualities, and you have that perfect politeness that knows how to express even oppositional opinions, usually also demonstrating how you can still understand other sides. If the group isn't listening to you, you're likely to think it's rude, but remain composed. But at the same time, you know, if you know yourself well especially, you're still going to manage to get your point across in a fair way, a respectful way. You are the intellectual one, the graceful one. But if you don't know yourself well, you run the risk of deliberately dumbing yourself down, or getting involved in messy situations and gossip in the group, or of leading others on when you were just trying to be nice to them. Another danger for this placement is that the socializing aspect takes over and the 11th house themes become superficially addressed, meaning the person will probably waste a lot of time, money, energy, perhaps not because they cared for the collective issue or progress, but because they were lonely or insecure and just wanted to be part of something, no matter what that thing was. With this placement, you will probably find that things you wish for are gained when you're just passive, patient, and cordial with all the things and people that you come across. Okay, that is my video on having planets in the 11th house. Hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time. Mwah.